So folks, thanks for joining us today on Leadership Log, which is a podcast for the Air Force Lifecycle Management Center community on topics of interest. And the topic of interest today is learning a little more about the Security Assistance Program and specifically the Security Assistance Program Manager's role. So we've got three experts lined up to explain this to us today, and let's go around and meet them first. We'll start with you, Kathy.
Hello, I am Catherine Smith. You can call me Kathy. When I first came into the government, I came into AFSAC, the Air Force Security Assistance Center. I came in as a case manager and then transitioned over to a program support manager. After a few years of doing that, I went over to the C-130 program and worked for the Israel C-130 program as a deputy SAPM. And I had the experience to go over to KC-46 and become a SAPM for the Japan program over there. I'm currently with F-22 now, non-FMS, but at some point in my career, I would like to go back to FMS.
Okay.
Thank you.
And we'll go to Brian.
Good afternoon. My name is Brian Koontz. I've been in the Air Force Civil Service for about 25 years. I came in as a contracting, in the contracting career field as a contract negotiator. And that's where I was first exposed to FMS, being a contracting officer for F-16 new business, then Israel, Greece, and Turkey. I then decided to make the jump to program management and first started in F-16 new business, working in India, Morocco, Turkey, Romania, Croatia. Decided it was time to jump off of new business and become a SAPM, where I'd be directly managing a program. Was the deputy SAPM for Morocco, then became the SAPM for Poland, then left F-16 for a little bit for a stint at NASIC and came back as a SAPM for Egypt. Then the Taiwan retrofit program, went back to NASIC for a second stint there. Then I was hired as the Qatar F-15 SAPM and just transitioned off of that a couple of days ago to be the Israel F-15 SAPM.
Okay, all right, cool. And Rick.
Yes, I'm Rick Wilson. I'm retired military. I was a logistics plans officer, retired in 2005, went to work in the C-17 SPO as a contractor, and there, about that time, Australia came in and wanted some C-17s. I can help put together that program and then moved on to that team when it started. Eventually a spot came open to be the deputy SAPM, and I came into civil service at that point. And I eventually became the program lead for that program, stuck with it for a while. Once it transitioned to Robbins, I went down and did the KC-46 new business FMS. After about a 4 stint there, I went to where I'm at now. I was originally the T-6 Argentina Security Assistance Program Manager, setting up their training program. And about 6 months ago, I transitioned over to be the Tunisia T-6C Program Manager.
Cool. So this is really interesting. I mean, we've got a lot of different geographic regions that you guys all have experience in. So, but before we go into that, let's learn first, what is the Security Assistance Program Manager? I mean, we've talked about SAPMs, okay? In military, we love our acronyms. So what exactly is a SAPM? And let's go to Brian.
Yeah, so the role of the SAPM is to be the single focal point for your FMS partner for a systems sale or systems acquisition. So the roles of a SAPM are laid out in the AFMAN 16101, and that's where you get your authority, and that's where the start of your duties are laid out. However, once you become a SAPM, you see those duties expand. You're the single focal point in most instances with your FMS partner for all things for your case. For a sale such as F-15, that includes not only your aircraft, but also items such as your weapons, construction, ancillary equipment, training. While there's a PM for all those, the FMS partner looks to the SAPM as their focal point. So when something goes wrong, it's your problem to fix. You're the one that they hold accountable. Likewise, when those program managers running different parts of the program run into a hard problem, they usually come to the SAPM to fix it. So the SAPM is the one belly button, the one person that is fully responsible for the execution of that program.
Mm-hmm. And you talk about these programs, and you kind of touched on it a little bit. I mean, these are complex programs. It's not simply going out and buying an airplane. It's a lot more complicated than that. So you're the person that navigates the bureaucracy, that knows all of the ins and outs of the programs. Rick, let's go to you next. What do you see as the role of the SAPM?
Well, and I think you've hit on it in kind of a nice transition there. The whole concept of a SAPM is you are to deliver a total package approach as part of the FMS process. You know, it's not just the airplane or the training or the support equipment. You know, we are there to deliver a capability to our partner. You know, that is the role that we are there, that we have been put into place to. So yes, it's all of ours. In many ways, I've even had my leadership say, you are the total program PM. So if a training system is having issues, it's my issue, even though, one of the program managers under it, even we cross organizational lines too. So with, there's the training directorate, there are different security, secure systems and things like that have their own program offices that we interact with. So that's it. We are the ultimate program integrator to deliver a total package to that foreign partner.
Kathy, what's your experience being a SAC?
So I echo what Brian and Rick just spelled out. What we hear them saying is the other PMs that fall under other directorates, we call them line managers. And I think that's one of our most difficult tasks is we have to always herd the cats. And no matter how much you herd, there's a lot of working relationships you build. There's a lot of working relationships that don't go so well, but you have to figure out how to rebuild it. Because like Rick said, we're responsible for their swim lane as well. So if they're delayed or if they're having issues, then we have to, as SAPMs, jump in and try to help them figure out how to mitigate these issues.
Right, because it can be, you may have a construction need for a particular system that you're buying, correct? And if there's a delay in that, then aircraft can't get delivered if the construction hasn't occurred already to happen. And so you're the person that cuts across lines to see all of that, correct?
Correct.
Okay. All right. So let's compare then this SAPM to a typical kind of acquisition program manager that's working on a particular platform or an element. What's the difference here? And we'll go back to Rick.
All right. I think the biggest difference between an Air Force program office, PM and us is the breadth of the responsibilities that we have. As we kind of alluded to earlier, and under the FMS case, I have responsibility for finances and manpower, as well as the delivery of the goods and services that are the totality of the FMS case. And that's really probably it in a nutshell. Most of your PMs in the program offices may be working a production option or a subsystem within that, or managing the GFE, or those sorts, or handling the security aspects of the program. Whereas we have to deal with all of those components, sometimes through sub-tier agencies, or sometimes through the direct team that we manage. We usually have our own team within the program office of between 6 and a dozen people. Some larger programs are much bigger than that, but that's about what we have. So either our team or through the associated teams out of the other acquisition centers.
Mm-hmm. And Kathy, I think you said earlier that you've worked both FMS and non-FMS as well. So how do they compare?
I believe FMS helped me become a better PM as in means of being able to juggle multiple aspects at one time. Because like Rick said, you have to multitask, you have to juggle competing aspects at one time when you're a SAPM. Whereas if you're in a non-FMS position, you don't have that total responsibility. Those responsibilities are broken out to other IPTs. But I have to say, to me, I work an agile program right now, so it's fast paced. FMS is very fast paced. And I think it prepared me for this program, even though I'm learning a lot of non-FMS processes. But the overall concept, it did help me become a good PM.
And Brian, what do you think?
Yeah, just want to echo a couple things that were already touched on. So the major difference is the breadth, as both Rick and Kathy mentioned. But when we do the breadth, we don't give up the depth as well. So for each system I've managed, there's been a developmental aspect of it, and for both F-15 and F-16, some significant development. So we have to be deep in development, test, production, fielding. So there's elements of the USAF side that we still see, such as that development. And a lot of the development we do on FMS is then taken by the USAF side and capitalized on for USAF programs, due to the decrease in USAF R&D recently. So we're doing a lot of the development that then gets utilized by the USAF side. Yeah. One other thing, as far as the breadth that we also had to deal with, we're also hurting cats that are cross service, and that's often where we get into some of the most difficulty. So it's not just different Air Force organizations. We're also working with the Navy for many of their weapons programs as we integrate an AIM-9X or a Harpoon onto our systems. We're working with a national security agency for different security items. We're working with the National Geospatial Intelligence Agency for map data. So we're touching several different pieces of DoD as well as other pieces of the government, and having to herd those cats as well. So it's difficult to exaggerate the breadth that you have to take into account and that you're responsible for. But while doing so, you do not lose the depth. You're responsible for that as well.
So it's interesting that you bring up development because, so right now the Air Force is buying the F-15EX, which was only available to us because of its further development as an FMS product over the years, the development of the F-15 platform. So Kathy, talk to us a little bit about kind of the development aspect of things as far as a program goes. When you're taking, so when a company or a country comes to buy an F-16, they're not just buying a regular F-16. It is new development, correct?
So it is new development. And I recall having a conversation several years ago with a couple of people that never worked FMS. They've always thought that with FMS, we take a USAF jet and modify it. But we do not do that. We build it from the ground up, just like a normal USAF jet. The big difference is FMS doesn't, well, let me go back, because there is the international program teams that do get involved with the development costs, but your typical FMS programs do not get involved with the development costs. And they typically wait until the USAF aircraft has been fielded before they jump on to start procuring their FMS programs. But you have the international cooperation program where they do get involved with the USAF and share the cost of the development. I've never worked one of those programs before. It'd be interesting to see that relationship and dialogue, to get through the development part. But as far as with my experience in FMS, we didn't get involved with the development. Now, there have been parts and pieces of FMS, like a weapon system, for the first time is being developed for FMS customer that was not developed for USAF. That processes tend to be long. We have to reach out to several agencies, as Brian mentioned before, NSA. Mainly, they're a big part of getting a lot of approvals. So with FMS, with development, we have a lot of releasability and approvals processes that we have to go through to get those in place. Over.
Rick, let's. What do you say as far as the development experience?
Yeah, I think the thing that we have to take into account, like Kathy alluded to, we have some external players that have approval of what capability gets ultimately offered to the partner nation. Yeah. And that may or may not be identical to what the USAF is actually operating on, national policies and things like that. It come into this here. And that can drive some unique development if, for instance, they deem a component of a US platform not releasable. Then we've got to bake that into the initial FMS case, build the schedule around that, and work that sort of development, testing, and approval all into it. And that makes it challenging because most of these programs are on a very accelerated timeline too. And if you have a development to stack into that, that adds another component to manage to it. But those sorts of cases do happen where we have to, you know, in order to accommodate the other segments of the government that have a say in the FMS process, we may have to do that and work that into the program. Generally speaking, we don't make countries pay back the development costs that the USAF has already paid for a platform up to that point. But like I said, if they're external agencies or if the country decides they want something that's different than the standard platform, that's where we get involved into a development as an addition to the FMS process.
And Brian, what do you say?
Yeah, my experience has been on the fighter side, and it's kind of been the opposite of what Kathy and Rick have said. And I'll give you a couple examples. You mentioned the F-15EX program, and the baseline for the EX program was the F-15 Qatar program, which I was just the SAPM on. The EX program, it has a lot of capabilities that the F-15E program did not. Fly-by-wire, glass cockpit, which is basically a flat screen TV in your cockpit. Some new generation manufacturing, and all those were developed on FMS programs. Saudi Arabia developed the fly-by-wire and sunk hundreds of millions of dollars into a fly-by-wire capability that the USAF never would have funded. Qatar funded the glass cockpit and some new next generation manufacturing capabilities that the USAF wanted, but they couldn't afford. So the USAF took advantage of hundreds of millions of dollars of FMS development in order to field the EX, which is the next generation of the F-15 that's going to be flying for quite a while. And the other thing the FMS programs do is they kept the production line alive. The last USAF F-15 came off the line in St. Louis in the late 90s, early 2000s. So for the last 20 years, FMS has kept that production line alive. So it's been thousands of U.S. jobs that have been kept, kept alive. It's been a production line, which is a national asset that's been kept hot and is now able to produce U.S. aircraft. Similarly on the F-16, on the Taiwan mod program, we developed the next generation ASA radar for the F-16, which is the first time an ASA had been put on an F-16. And the International Guard liked it so much, they decided to integrate it as well after Taiwan paid for the development test of it. So on the fighter side, I think a reduction in U.S. R&D dollars as put towards some fourth generation aircraft, that lack of development's been made up by our FMS partners. And because of that, the U.S. Air Force is getting some capabilities at a much reduced cost.
Yeah, that's a great benefit to the warfighter, really. So, Kathy, I know you said you started in AFSAC. So let's compare the role of a SAPM to a country manager. So recently we did an episode where we talked to some of the command country managers. So give us kind of a back and forth with that.
Well, I'm trying to find other words to how I usually describe it. So I don't want to offend anyone. It's a huge difference. And until you have the experience to work in a program office, you really don't know, how much rewarding it is compared to working over at AFSAC. I'm gonna speak for myself. Working over at AFSAC as a case manager and program support manager, and now worked into a program office, I felt that I was just pushing paper. I wasn't making any decisions. I just felt, when I look back, I said, I was just pushing paper. Working in a program office, like I said, is more rewarding because you can help make decisions on behalf of the government. And you work with so many other agencies, DCAA, DCMA, NSA, you work with the Army, you work with the Navy, you have multiple line managers in multiple geographical locations. You are responsible to report to your PEO, and you work and you build relationships with your allies. You have some of that responsibility as a CCM, but not as working it as a SAPM. To me, a SAPM is much more higher rating than a CCM. But But let me
Yeah.
come back. We can't do what we do without a CCM. They provide a lot of insight based off of their relationships that they build as well. But we cannot do what we do without them.
Yeah, because I mean, ultimately, we're trying to give a service to our international partners, and somebody's got to be plugged in there and kind of monitoring to make sure that all of this is coming together. I mean, you can imagine when you first get into acquisitions, you begin to learn how complex this whole system is, and if you're an international partner coming into the system trying to understand this from day one, I mean, that would be really super complicated.
I mean, it made me think about it if the program or a part of the program is delayed and your PEO come and wants some answers, he's not going to go to the CCM. He's going to go to your SAPM.
Right. Okay, so let's go to what's most interesting about the SAPM role, or maybe even a particular career highlight that you've had, or a program or something that you feel went especially well, or you feel really proud of. And let's go to Rick first.
Okay, yeah. Obviously, I think it's getting a chance to work with the international partners and see how they would like to use, a very similar capability, how the Air Force already does. The other neat thing about it is, we go to war in a coalition now. Everybody, and by providing this capability to those partners, for mission planning and all those sorts of facets of things, if they have a C-130J, everybody knows what a C-130J does, and giving that, and for support and all of those things, if you have the same aircraft operating in the region, it just makes things so much easier. Probably the most interesting, though, is obviously working with the international partners and seeing those things. I know for me, probably one of the proudest moments I had was obviously working the Australia program. And during the nuclear power plant meltdown, at one point, they had all 4 of their jets lined up. There's a picture of the 3. It's a Stallion is their squadron, the squadron mascot. They flew over to Perth, got these great big water cannons that they use for mining, flew them to Japan, and those were, soaking the reactor to try and control it. And it's like, I was a part of that. Those are my jets too, and that sort of thing, the personal pride you get to take in delivering that sort of capability, and then getting to see it actually in use. I got to be at the first graduation ceremony in Argentina for the first class of T-6C students going through the schoolhouse. Those are the things that are, most interesting and most rewarding, I think, from the job.
Okay. And we'll go to Brian.
Yeah, I think the most interesting part of being a SAPM is the ability to really impact your allies' defense capability. So when you're a SAPM, you're usually dealing with a foreign partner who's usually kind of senior to yourself. On Qatar, for the first few years, my counterpart was the A3. So he was the Air Force's Director of Operations. And USAF side, that'd be a 3-star. So you're dealing with very senior people. You're dealing with deputy defense ministers. You're dealing with chiefs of defense. In one program, the person we were dealing with was third in line to the throne. So you're dealing with very senior people and helping them with their defense capabilities. While the U.S. has several different air defense platforms, especially when you're dealing with an F-16 program, this is all they've got. So your ability to deliver on schedule with the right amount of capability and within the cost that they can afford directly impacts their ability to defend their country and retain their sovereignty. So that's a lot on your shoulders, but it can also be very rewarding. As far as probably the greatest career moment, when I think back, I think my greatest career moment was when Israel destroyed a Syrian reactor that was in a piece of territory that was later controlled by ISIS. So if the thought of ISIS with a nuclear reactor is kind of scary as it should be, it was destroyed with F-16s and F-15s, both of which I played a small part in, but that's where you see that FMS really pays off. The world's safer because of what they did with the aircraft that we supplied to them.
Mm-hmm. And Kathy?
So I echo what both Rick and Brian just said, and just to add on to that, being a SAPM, you have your good days, you have your bad days. whether it be the relationships that you're working, whether it be just people aren't meeting your needs. But at the end of the day, when that aircraft is built and you have that rollout ceremony and all of that other frustration that you've gone through to get to that day, it goes away, you know, and it is very rewarding to see that aircraft roll out and you like, wow, I was a part of that. You know, I was a part of making that happen. That's a feeling I think only the other feeling that can take that away is if I hit the lottery for millions of dollars. But that, I mean, it's a very rewarding feeling. It is that I can't get it on a USAF program.
Yeah. Well, so thanks everybody for joining us today. That pretty much brings us to the end of our time. But before we close, is there anything I forgot to ask you about or anything that you'd like to add? Anybody?
For anyone who's only worked a USAF program and you want something different, you know, you should give FMS a chance. It can be very rewarding. It's very challenging. It's a great career broadener if you've never done it.
Yeah, okay. It is not what you've heard it to be. There's a lot of rumors about FMS. You have to check FMS out.
That's probably one of the ones. It's probably, you know, like we get a lot of trainees in there now. So it's kind of a perfect environment for them because you touch so many different facets of the program. You get an opportunity to get a broad exposure during a one-year rotation or things like that, that working out of a program office isn't typical for you to see that much because programs are so fast-paced and you do have such a breadth of responsibility.
Okay. Well, hey, thanks everybody for joining us today and helping us better understand what the role of the SAPM is in FMS and in program management.
Thank you for having me.
Yep, thank you.